It's not quite draft season, but why wait? Draft a fantasy baseball team right now. That's what I did. This is my first team of the 2025 season. I'll break down what happened, where I picked, and why I went the direction I did. Before we look at the draft board, obvious caveat here, ADP and draft slots will change. A lot is still yet to be determined from now until opening day, but this is a good chance to take a look at the early ADP and how other drafters are thinking. There aren't a whole lot of places where you can actually draft a legit team as of right now. NFBC is where I'm doing it. This is where the early drafters go. A lot of people who want to be in those high stakes league. I kept it to an NFBC 50, which means $50 entry. And for this particular league type, it's a 12 teamer and it's an NFBC 50, which means you have 50 bucks, but also 50 rounds. This is a draft and hold team. No free agents, no trades. It's just set and forget. And also in NFBC rules, this is a two catcher league. So that did change things up, especially in the early rounds for me. So bottom line, I got lucky. I got the number one pick. And so who did I take number one overall? Well, you should know. I already did a video on this, very first video of this offseason. Who should be number one? It's Shohei Ohtani. Though if you want to know why I took Ohtani number one, well, just go watch that video. But I will say this. If I do another NFBC 50, which I almost surely will, and I get the number one pick again, I probably won't take Ohtani again. I might go with Bobby Witt Jr. So the one thing is I do like to differentiate. Of course, if you're going to do multiple entries in the same league type, then you should try to mix it up a little bit. And there are a couple of drawbacks to taking Shohei Ohtani. The first thing is this affects your roster construction because he has to take up that utility spot. And so not only are you clogging up that utility spot, which isn't the worst thing when you have a guy who is the MVP, but this means that you basically haven't addressed any position, offense or pitching, and then you're already into round two, and a lot of those top players are gone. And we can't say there's no risk with Ohtani because he has had injuries in the past, and back to pitching again this year. You got to wonder if that will affect him on offense. But still, I'm okay with Ohtani at the number one pick. Now, this particular draft, I'm not going to get too deep into the other teams that drafted. And I have, by the way, whited out the names, the team names, to protect the innocent. But I'll quickly go through these first two rounds. Look, number two was Bobby Witt Jr., and then number three wasn't Aaron Judge, it was Ellie De La Cruz. I did have a discussion with Chris Towers of CBS Fantasy not too long ago about why that might be a little too risky for Ellie that high. But hey, he's going to be a first round pick, a top five pick pretty much everywhere. So there he went. Judge was four. And then the rest of the first round was pretty standard. But I will say two things stuck out to me. Team 12, win pocket aces, not just one, but two young pitchers back to back. A super risky strategy. I mean, it could pay off. You never know, but I'm not doing it even if I have the 12 pick. And then I almost on the way back had Freddie Freeman land to me in the second round. I was shocked to see Freeman fall that far. I know everybody likes the young players. You want somebody who's, maybe on the upswing, going to get you the speed plus the power. Yeah, Freddie Freeman, sure, his steals did take a nosedive last year. And I think maybe he's falling also because, well, there was some injury concerns during the postseason, despite how great he was in the World Series. He obviously had some issues and has having offseason surgery. But everything I've read is saying that he's going to be fine entering the season. He's not going to miss any time. And look, even though he's not going to maybe steal as many bases as he has at his peak, at his prime of his career, he still will get you double digit steals, I think. And so this to me seems like a bargain. I would have been thrilled if he would have fallen to me at round two, but I was one pick away. And as much as I'm willing to kind of forgive guys like Corbin Carroll, Julio Rodriguez, and to a lesser extent Fernando Tatis Jr. for being disappointing last year, not living up to their ADP, I'm not taking those guys over Freddie Freeman. I'm okay with them late first round, but I think Freeman deserves to be ahead of them because he's been doing this for a decade plus. So at the 2-3 turn, I went with Trey Turner, another five category stud. A little disappointing last year in terms of his batting average early in the season. Got off to a sluggish start, did miss a little bit of time, but he came around, still showing the same bat skills as usual. His stolen base totals also took a little bit of a dip last year, but I'm chalking that up to injury and the amount of games that he missed. And you're getting that batting average taken care of early, at least I am, with Ohtani and then Trey Turner. That's something that I definitely want to secure. And then talking about that two catcher rule. So here we go. I don't think it's a reach to take a guy like William Contreras because he will also get you a super high floor in terms of batting average. He'll get you the counting stats. And I don't think that there was anybody else I think was a surefire pick here ahead of Contreras. Now, as far as the rest of the board goes, we saw that there were only two teams that took a starting pitcher in the first two rounds. That was Team 12, who went pocket aces, and then Zach Wheeler was taken. But now in round 3, we see 4 different starters get drafted. And in round 4, we see the first pair of closers taken. Again, I understand getting that lockdown closer. I'll prefer to wait a little bit on saves, which I did. But here we go with starting pitchers starting to come off the board. I decided this is the time to strike. So instead of going early, and by early I mean the first 3 rounds, in rounds 4 and 5, I'm going to take a pair of aces. Dylan Cease, who's going to get me an insane amount of strikeouts and had a really good season altogether last year. And then Yoshinobu Yamamoto, also, again, a guy I was so high on last year, drafted him way too much. He missed a lot of time because of injury. Hoping for a bounce back here. Of course, there's always risk with any starting pitcher. I have to acknowledge that. But I like these two, and so I got my aces here. And then you see right after that, there was a run on starting pitchers. And the reason I specifically took pitching there, because knowing that I'm on the end of the turn here, by the time it comes back to me, the tier drop is going to be fairly significant if I didn't get at least one pitcher. I didn't have to go 2, but I decided that was the way to go. And you see there in round 5, 9 of the 12 picks were pitchers, most of them starters. And also, part of the reason I went pitching there twice is because this is where we're entering the territory where the elite hitters are gone, and all of these guys have a decent amount of risk. I know some people are sky high on Lawrence Butler. Man, we can't just assume his second half breakout is going to continue. We've seen this before. I mean, he could be this year's Nolan Jones. Not saying he will be. It's very possible, though. Willie Adames, is he really going to be a stud in San Francisco? And Luis Robert Jr., as of right now, still with the White Sox, so there's their downside right there. Then we see a couple more closers. I decided to take one who is reliable. It's Robert Suarez of the Padres. And then round 7, I'm going Brenton Doyle of the Rockies. Now, also with this league, it's 5 outfielders, so you really can't wait too long to address that position. And again, that's the one thing with a guy like Ohtani first, as opposed to a Judge or another position. I haven't addressed outfield at all over these first few rounds, so I'm going with Doyle, a guy who definitely gets me some power and some speed. The average at least will be decent, maybe some room for improvement this year, and will score some runs as well. No big surprises at this point of the draft. Nobody's really reaching here. Again, this is high stakes. A lot of these drafters know what they're doing. I've done this many times before. We notice that a lot of the catchers start to get filled in here. I'd say my favorite value right here in this range is Jordan Westburg there, beginning of the 8th round. I think he's just so undervalued. So at the end of round 8, I play it relatively safe, and I get a first baseman in Josh Naylor. I do worry that his power might take a slight downtick going to Arizona, but he's going to get me, again, batting average. He's going to drive in runs. He's in a good lineup, so I feel pretty secure with that pick where I took him. And then to get a little bit riskier, the upside of Royce Lewis. I mean, just stay out there. 120 games, maybe that would be great. If you wonder where Mike Trout's going these days, it's the middle of round 9. Now, when we get to round 10, I make the first pick, maybe the only pick that I won't say I regret, but I got to wonder in retrospect if I could have made a better pick for my roster. I like Ezekiel Tovar. I like where I took him in terms of value, but think about the fact I already had Trey Turner at shortstop. I didn't really feel a need in terms of position. Now, of course, he just goes into my middle infield spot, so no problem. I really also question the fact that I have 2 Rockies in my roster. And yes, the Rockies are going to be one of the worst teams in the majors again. I don't see that changing. And so these two will be the better parts of their offense, meaning Tovar, and I already took earlier Brenton Doyle. But there might have been a pick I could have made that was smarter instead at that point. I mean, you still see guys like Anthony Volpe there, same position. I do like his upside just as much. Next round, I addressed second base with Bryce Terang, locked into an everyday role, whether he plays second base or shortstop this year. And then a prime bounce back candidate, my boy, Sandy Alcantara. Let's see if he returns even close to his form, his Cy Young form from before. I mean, he's had plenty of time to recover. And so I think at this stage in the draft, definitely worth the risk. And then something I noticed here as I go to round 14, I got AL Rookie of the Year runner up Colton Cowser at outfield. How is it that one of the best young teams in baseball, especially on offense, the Baltimore Orioles, have so many undervalued players, especially a guy like Cowser, who was really good throughout most of last year? Jordan Westbrook already said he's one of my favorite picks here. Jackson Holiday, I understand he was horrible when he debuted, but still, the upside is so massive. I mean, the fact he's being drafted so late this year, even later than before he was drafted last year when we didn't even know when he'd debut, is a little puzzling to me. And then one thing that's easy to overlook, but I think is critical in leagues like this, especially in a draft and hold format, you want some positional flexibility. So I grabbed guys like Luis Rengifo of the Angels and Ceddanne Rafaela of the Red Sox, who qualify not only multiple positions, but multiple slots. Rengifo can play second or third base, which means you can put him at the middle or the corner infield if needed. And Rafaela, even though he'll be the center fielder, also qualifies as shortstop. Not the case anymore with Jung Ho Lee, who's just an outfielder, but I think a great injury discount here, a guy who could bounce back. And Jurickson Profar, after a great season, is being very undervalued. I took them after addressing closer again, Kyle Finnegan. Had a great season. Not sure why he's being drafted so late. And Bowden Francis, with the way he ended last year, again, shocked that he fell this late. And I go back to back to back with young pitchers with upside. Maybe a little too young, a little too much risk here, but like I really like David Fessa. Jackson Jobe just needs a shot in the rotation. Kumar Rocker could be an ace. This draft did go 50 rounds. I'm not going to go through every one of my picks and rounds, but just continue and say that some of the picks I like the best were, even though I definitely did not need another shortstop, Brooks Lee, promising rookie last year for the Twins. Not only is he somebody who has a ton of potential, look, it's kind of hedging my bet against Royce Lewis. If Royce Lewis misses time again, then when they could move Lee back to third base. And another shortstop, I just couldn't help it. But again, I'm going for offensive potential and value with Jacob Wilson, a guy who could be basically like the next Luis Arias. And seeing how it's a two-catcher league, two catchers isn't enough because injuries happen and so do struggles. So I took two more catchers. One who's a relatively safe player who I think will at least get a decent amount of at-bats. That's Freddie Furman, Kansas City. He has his moments. And then Adrian Del Castillo in Arizona. I mean, he was red hot with the bat. When he first got called up, he really just needs a path to regular playing time. I like his potential, so I took him as well. And some pitchers I'll be taking a lot toward the later rounds of these types of drafts and even others if they're available to me. Slade Ciccone of now the Cleveland Guardians, someone who got sent over in that Josh Naylor trade. You know, he's an interesting prospect, but also the fact that Cleveland knows how to develop pitchers. They saw something in him that they liked, and now he's got a shot to be in their rotation. And it may be a mistake to be in on Joe Boyle again, but look, if someone can harness that heat, it's Tampa Bay, right? And it's a favorable home park, so let's see if they can get his walk rate to maybe close to single digits. Hey, there you go. He might have some potential. And I want to point out a couple of picks I like that I didn't get to make. Again, being at the end here, the number one pick, blessing and a curse. You know, you have to wait a while before you can pick. So I couldn't get all of my targets in the queue, but here's some of the picks that the other drafters made that I wish I could have gotten where they were drafted. After a breakout season in 24, Helio Ramos going in round 15 of a 5 outfielder league seems like a great value to me. Luis Gil, who was Rookie of the Year, somehow fell to round 17. And it looks like I'll still be in on Mackenzie Gore for a third straight year, hoping for that full season breakout. I think round 18 is definitely late enough to take a chance on him. And then Isaac Paredes now moving to Houston should just help his power numbers. So the fact he fell to round 22, again, I'm not really sure why. And then in rounds 25 and 26, we saw a pair of rookies for the Red Sox who could be fighting for Rookie of the Year award, and that's Roman Anthony and Christian Campbell, both smart picks. And finally, even though I know that the chances of him debuting at all, much less by midseason, are not great, I took Travis Bazzana of Cleveland because it feels like they're clearing the path for him at second base. This guy's an advanced hitter. I wouldn't be shocked if we see him at some point. And again, this is a draft and hold format. You know what? If you want him, you got to get him now. If he gives me even just a month or two of solid production, I'll take it. Now we got our feet wet in the 2025 draft season. There'll be plenty more diving into ADP. Look at some of the best values and some of those landmines you want to avoid. Keep it locked here, like and subscribe, and also check out the latest video.